Admiral Richard Byrd was already a legend before he ever set eyes on the frozen South again. Born in 1888 in Virginia, he grew up fascinated by flight, navigation, and the dream of reaching places no one had ever seen. By his mid-30s, Byrd had crossed both poles, commanded fleets of aircraft, and returned home as one of America's most celebrated explorers. During the 1920s and 30s, his expeditions mapped vast regions of Antarctica, established temporary bases, and brought back the first aerial photographs of the southern continent. He spoke often of its stark beauty, its silence, and its promise. To him, Antarctica was not a wasteland, but a frontier that might one day shape the future of the world. By the end of the Second World War, Byrd was no longer just an explorer. He was a national figure, a strategist, and a man trusted to lead thousands. So when the Navy sought to test its strength in the most hostile environment on Earth, there was only one name they turned to. In 1946, he accepted command of an operation unlike any before it, a mission that would take nearly 5,000 men to the end of the world. Names in the wall. The war had ended, but peace was uncertain. The atomic age had dawned, and the great powers now watched one another across oceans and ice. Antarctica, once a blank space on the map, became a point of sudden interest. Its location, remote, vast, and unclaimed, offered a strategic prize. For the United States, it represented more than curiosity. Military planners saw in the polar region a natural laboratory for survival, communications, and weapon testing. The Navy called it a research expedition. Privately, officials described it as a test of endurance, logistics, and military readiness at the bottom of the world. The mission was named Operation Highjump. It would deploy 13 ships, 33 aircraft, and nearly 5,000 men. Their goals were simple on paper: to establish a base called Little America 4, to train for cold weather warfare, and to conduct aerial mapping of the continent. But behind the formal language lay questions no one yet dared to ask. Why such a vast force for a scientific mission? And why the rush to reach the pole again, so soon after the war had ended? In August 1946, the ships of Operation Highjump departed Norfolk, Virginia. The convoy stretched across the horizon. Destroyers, supply vessels, tankers, and the great aircraft carrier USS Philippine Sea, her decks loaded with planes built for the cold. Admiral Byrd flew ahead in his own command aircraft, the George I, equipped for long-range exploration. He would oversee the operation from above, directing squadrons that would photograph and map the frozen interior. As the fleet crossed into the southern seas, men recorded icebergs the size of cities, drifting in the mist. Temperatures dropped below -40. Machinery froze solid within hours. It was a world that punished the unprepared and tested even the strong. On board, spirits were high but tempered by the unknown. Few had ever seen Antarctica, and none had attempted such an operation on this scale. In their journals, sailors described it as a floating city bound for the edge of the earth. They did not know how close that description might prove to the truth. By late December 1946, the fleet sighted the first jagged peaks of the Antarctic continent. Columns of mist rose from the horizon like smoke from a sleeping volcano. The ships slowed, carving through the ice pack as reconnaissance planes soared ahead to scout landing zones. The air was so cold that breath froze in seconds. Men worked in heavy layers, their eyelashes stiff with frost. Each sound, a hammer blow, a groan of ice, seemed amplified by the emptiness. They had reached the Ross Ice Shelf, a floating plain of ice hundreds of feet thick and hundreds of miles wide. Here, Byrd ordered the establishment of Little America 4, the fourth in a line of bases he had founded since 1929. Prefabricated huts, weather stations, and radio towers were dragged onto the ice by tractors. Planes were assembled, fuel cached, and supply lines marked with flags stretching into the endless white. The official record described the progress as steady, but among the crew, rumors began to drift of malfunctioning instruments, compass errors, and strange magnetic readings. Some whispered that the ice itself seemed to move. Work continued through January, the brief Antarctic summer when the sun never set. The men lived in near daylight 24 hours a day, the horizon glowing even at midnight. Sleep became irregular, and time lost its rhythm. The base, though temporary, grew into a small, frozen town. Workshops, kitchens, barracks, even a chapel built from snow blocks. Planes flew in long arcs over the continent, photographing terrain that had never before been mapped. Each flight carried enough fuel for only one chance to return. Blizzards struck without warning. Winds over 100 miles per hour tore tents from the ice and buried equipment in minutes. Yet the mission pressed on. Byrd's orders were clear: complete the survey and prove that the United States could operate anywhere on Earth. Still, the reports filtering back to Washington hinted at challenges beyond weather. Pilots wrote of shimmering lights below the ice, and engineers complained of sudden drops in radio signal strength. The official logs made no mention of these things, but the personal diaries did. On January 29, 1947, tragedy struck. A reconnaissance aircraft known as the George I, commanded by Admiral Byrd himself, went missing during a routine mapping flight. For 14 hours, all radio contact was lost. Search planes fanned out across the ice, following only static and silence. When the crew was finally located, the plane had crashed in heavy fog. 3 men were dead. Byrd and the survivors were found huddled beside the wreckage, frostbitten and exhausted. He later described the incident as a battle with the elements themselves. Officially, the cause was weather, a sudden whiteout that disoriented the instruments. Unofficially, rumors spread through the fleet that something else had occurred. Pilots spoke of magnetic interference, compasses spinning without cause, and lights moving beneath the cloud layer. When questioned later, Byrd dismissed the stories, calling them the product of fear and fatigue. But in his private notes, he wrote one sentence that historians still debate: "The ice is not as it seems." In the weeks following the crash of the George I, the men of Operation Highjump pushed deeper into the continent. 3 main air groups fanned out from Little America 4, photographing mountain ranges, frozen lakes, and shadowed valleys never before seen by human eyes. Pilots described the view as haunting: endless plains of silver light broken by dark circular depressions that seemed to swallow the sun. Most were likely collapsed ice caverns, formed when underground meltwater carved hollow chambers below. But from the air, they appeared like vast openings leading into the unknown. Word spread quickly through the camp. Some began calling them the breathing holes, convinced that warm air rising from beneath caused instruments to flicker. Engineers found that compasses behaved erratically whenever flights passed above the darker zones. No clear explanation was given. The photographs were shipped north for analysis. sealed in classified containers. Even Byrd admitted privately that the ice concealed more than it revealed. In one letter he wrote, "The surface of this land hides great voids below, perhaps older than the world itself." Through February, reports of strange aerial phenomena multiplied. Night flights saw luminous glows beneath thin cloud layers, soft halos of blue and green that drifted slowly before fading. At first, meteorologists blamed ice crystals and atmospheric electricity, but several observers insisted the lights moved with intent. One radio operator recorded a burst of static, followed by a low humming vibration that shook the fuselage of his plane. Another swore he saw a faint circular motion within the clouds, as if the air itself were turning. None of it appeared in the official reports. The mission was still considered a success. Thousands of photographs had been taken, new data gathered, and the limits of human endurance tested. Yet unease crept through the camp. Men spoke in low voices about seeing reflections of their own searchlights bouncing from beneath them, not above. Byrd, ever composed, urged focus and discipline. He reminded his crews that exploration required courage and faith in reason, but even he could sense that the ice was watching. When the expedition's films were processed aboard the carrier Philippine Sea, a handful of aerial frames caught the attention of technicians. They showed vast circular shadows etched into the white, too symmetrical, too dark to be mere meltwater. Some measured hundreds of meters across. The images were forwarded to Washington for study. Within days, orders arrived restricting further commentary. The photographs were to be logged, sealed, and flown back under military escort. No public explanation was ever issued. Among the men, speculation ran wild. Some believed they had stumbled upon enormous volcanic vents. Others whispered about caverns leading into a hollow earth, tales drawn from old sailor myths and pulp magazines. None could prove anything, but the idea took hold. By early March, the tone of the expedition had changed. The air was colder, the storms more violent, and morale began to slip. Every creak of the ice sounded like something moving below. The line between observation and imagination was beginning to blur. By the second week of March 1947, the expedition had reached its operational peak. Over 70 flights had been completed, charting nearly 1.5 million square miles of Antarctic terrain. Yet something unseen was beginning to erode the mission from within. Communication between aircraft and base grew increasingly unstable. Radio transmissions dissolved into bursts of static that came and went like a pulse. At times, entire channels went silent, then returned with faint echoes of previous conversations, as though signals were being bounced back from somewhere unseen. Engineers blamed the extreme cold for interfering with vacuum tubes and electrical circuits, but the frequency of failures did not match the temperature drops. Even replacement equipment fresh from storage suffered the same fate. One pilot reported seeing a sharp flash of light below the clouds, followed by his altimeter spinning wildly for 10 seconds before resetting itself. Byrd ordered an immediate inspection of all aircraft instruments, yet nothing unusual was found. Whatever was happening seemed to come from the sky itself. On February 25th, Admiral Byrd called an unscheduled command meeting aboard the flagship. What was said behind closed doors has never been fully recorded, but within 48 hours, new orders were issued. The expedition would begin withdrawing immediately. Officially, the reason was deteriorating weather and logistical exhaustion. Supplies were running low, and mechanical wear had pushed the fleet to its limit. Yet many of the men believed the decision had come too suddenly. They had trained for an 8-month campaign. It ended after barely 8 weeks on the ice. Crews began dismantling the base and loading cargo with uncharacteristic haste. Several film reels and documents were flown directly to Washington for technical evaluation. No one was told what they contained. On March 1st, 1947, the last of the ships turned north. Operation Highjump, one of the largest expeditions in history, was over. It had achieved most of its declared objectives, yet left behind more questions than answers. In the months that followed, Admiral Byrd returned to the United States to report his findings. His official statements focused on scientific achievements, mapping data, weather patterns, and the challenges of polar logistics. But in private interviews, his tone was markedly different. During a stop in Santiago, Chile, he spoke to a local newspaper, warning that the United States must be prepared against enemy aircraft capable of flying from pole to pole at incredible speeds. The remark caused immediate confusion and speculation. No one could clarify what he meant, and the Navy quickly retracted the statement. When asked later, Byrd refused to elaborate, saying only that the Antarctic holds dangers and secrets beyond comprehension. His words spread rapidly through the press, igniting decades of rumor about hidden technologies, subterranean worlds, and things seen in the sky that had no place in the official record. Operation Highjump had ended, but the mystery of what truly happened in those frozen months was only beginning. By the summer of 1947, the men of Operation Highjump were home again. They returned to a nation that had already turned its attention to new fears: nuclear tests, espionage, and the rising tension of the Cold War. The Antarctic, it seemed, had faded into the background. But not for long. Within weeks of Byrd's comments in South America, speculation began to spread. Newspapers from Chile to the United States printed conflicting versions of his statement, some claiming he had spoken of flying objects emerging from polar regions. Others accused the press of misquoting him entirely. The Navy released an official summary of Operation Highjump, listing its accomplishments and downplaying its difficulties. No mention was made of lost aircraft, classified photographs, or magnetic anomalies. It was presented as a triumph of logistics and courage, a success story from the frozen frontier. Yet among the crew, letters began circulating quietly. Men who had seen things they could not explain wrote to one another, describing lights, sounds, and the sense that the ice itself had depth beyond measure. The seeds of mystery had taken root. In the years that followed, a strange myth began to grow. Writers and radio hosts claimed that Admiral Byrd had flown into a vast opening at the South Pole and discovered a hidden world beneath the ice, a land of warmth, vegetation, and advanced beings. The story originated from an alleged secret diary, said to be written by Byrd himself, discovered long after his death. In it, he supposedly described entering the Earth's interior and meeting a race that warned humanity against self-destruction. Historians later debunked the diary as a fabrication created by fringe writers during the 1950s. Still, the idea captured the imagination of millions. It appeared in science fiction magazines, radio plays, and even early television documentaries. To the public, the boundaries between fact and myth blurred completely. Operation Highjump was no longer a scientific mission. It was a legend. And in that legend, Admiral Byrd became both explorer and messenger, forever linked to the mysteries said to dwell beneath the Antarctic ice. For the rest of his life, Byrd avoided discussing Operation Highjump in detail. He continued to serve as an advisor for polar research, leading smaller expeditions into the 1950s. But his tone grew more reserved. To close friends, he admitted that the mission had changed him. His personal writings reveal no trace of hidden worlds or encounters, only exhaustion and loss. He mourned the men who had died and worried that the mission's secrecy had overshadowed its true purpose, to understand one of the last untouched regions of Earth. Yet public fascination never faded. For every historian who explained the anomalies as weather or magnetic distortion, another writer would claim evidence of tunnels, ancient ruins, or technology buried beneath the ice. Byrd, who had once sought only to explore, had become the center of something far larger than himself. In his final years, he returned to Antarctica one last time, standing again before the endless white horizon. Whether he found peace there, no one can say. By the late 1950s, Operation Highjump had taken on a life of its own. Writers who had never set foot near the pole began linking the expedition to another wartime obsession, the myth of the Nazi base in Antarctica. According to these stories, fleeing German forces had carried advanced technology to a hidden fortress known as Base 211, carved deep beneath the ice. There, they were said to have tested flying discs, secret energy sources, and weapons capable of defying gravity. No credible evidence ever surfaced, yet the tale spread rapidly through post-war Europe and the United States. Each unexplained photograph from Highjump became proof of something concealed, each lost aircraft a victim of confrontation. Declassified naval reports decades later confirmed no battle had occurred, only accidents, storms, and cold that punished even steel. But by then, the legend was too strong to die. Antarctica had become the perfect blank canvas for secrets no one could disprove. In 1955, 8 years after Highjump, the United States returned to Antarctica under a new name, Operation Deep Freeze. This time, the mission was openly scientific, supporting the upcoming International Geophysical Year. Many of Byrd's surviving crewmen joined again, determined to finish what they had begun. They established permanent research stations, including the Amundsen-Scott South Pole Station, built directly over the geographic pole itself. Byrd, now older and frail, visited the site in spirit if not in strength. He died 2 years later, in 1957, leaving behind maps that would guide scientists for generations. Operation Deep Freeze proved that the continent could sustain year-round habitation. It also confirmed what many had suspected. Beneath the endless ice lay mountains taller than the Alps, valleys the size of entire countries, and freshwater lakes sealed off for millions of years. To explorers of the imagination, it was proof that hidden worlds did exist, only not the kind they had expected. Modern satellites have revealed what Byrd could never see. Beneath Antarctica's frozen crust lie more than 400 subglacial lakes, some kept liquid by heat from the Earth's core. Among them, Lake Vostok, a body of water sealed beneath 2 miles of ice, untouched for perhaps 15 million years. Magnetic surveys have mapped vast anomalies, regions where the field bends strangely, perhaps due to dense metallic rock or meteorite impacts. To those who believe in hidden cities, these readings are the heartbeats of ancient machines. To scientists, they are puzzles of geology and time. Even today, the continent guards its secrets. Beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet, researchers have detected shapes that could be canyons, caverns, or something yet unnamed. No human has ever walked there. And so the myth endures. The ice is still not as it seems. By the dawn of the 21st century, new eyes had turned toward Antarctica. Satellites, drones, and a global audience connected through screens. Every fresh image of the continent's surface was examined, magnified, and dissected by millions online. Soon, internet forums began sharing photographs that appeared to show circular openings in the ice, hundreds of feet across. Some called them natural sinkholes. Others claimed they were entrances to underground facilities. Each pixel became proof, each shadow a doorway. The fact that Antarctica was governed by international treaty, restricting military activity and limiting travel, only fueled suspicion. Why, people asked, was the coldest place on Earth also the most forbidden? From there, the story of Operation Highjump resurfaced in force. Videos, books, and documentaries claimed Byrd had discovered something extraordinary, and that governments had been hiding it ever since. In the digital age, his expedition was reborn as legend. Not all of the rumors were without substance. Beneath the Antarctic Treaty's scientific language lies a quiet truth. Many nations maintain hidden research stations, their work shielded by classification. Some study climate patterns, others deep geology, and a few, according to whispers, far stranger things. In 2006, seismic readings detected unexplained vibrations beneath the Queen Maud region, an area long associated with the old Nazi myth. Official reports described it as glacial movement, yet no surface shift was recorded. A year later, Google Earth imagery revealed a near-perfect oval indentation in the ice, its dark interior vanishing into shadow. Though likely a natural cave formed by subglacial melting, it reignited talk of entrances hidden from the world. Some claimed it matched coordinates mentioned in early high-jump flight logs. Each new anomaly pulled the old story back from history's frost, and through it all, the ghost of Admiral Byrd's warning echoed faintly, of dangers that could cross the poles at incredible speed. Today, Operation Highjump remains both a triumph of exploration and a canvas for imagination. It was the last expedition where mystery still outweighed measurement, where white space on the map invited questions instead of answers. For historians, it stands as proof of human endurance, of men facing the harshest conditions on Earth to expand knowledge and reach. For storytellers, it is the seed from which every Antarctic legend has grown. From the hollow Earth to hidden bases, from alien craft to forgotten civilizations, every theory circles back to those few frozen months of 1947. One expedition, caught between two worlds, science and myth, forever bound by ice. And perhaps that is the true legacy of Operation Highjump. Not what it found, but what it left By the 1960s, Operation Highjump had already crossed from military record into myth. Documentaries aired late at night, pairing grainy photographs of ice cliffs with dramatic narrations about hidden worlds below. Writers from pulp magazines to science fiction journals wove Byrd's expedition into tales of alien civilizations, Nazi relics, and ancient technology buried beneath the South Pole. The concept of a hollow Earth became a cultural fascination. Movies imagined lost continents beneath Antarctica, while early UFO researchers pointed to the polar regions as gateways to other worlds. It was fiction, but inspired by fragments of truth too tantalizing to ignore. Through it all, Admiral Byrd's reputation shifted from pioneer to prophet. To his admirers, he was a man who had seen too much and spoken too little. To skeptics, he was simply a victim of the Cold War's fog of secrecy. Whatever the truth, the world had decided. The ice was no longer just a place. It was a mystery. In 1959, a dozen nations signed the Antarctic Treaty, an unprecedented agreement to preserve the continent for peace and science. It banned military bases, weapon testing, and territorial claims, making Antarctica the only region on Earth governed entirely by cooperation. To many, the treaty was a triumph of diplomacy. To others, it was the ultimate cover. If no one owned Antarctica, no one could investigate too deeply. Exploration required permission, and much of the continent remained off limits under the guise of environmental protection. Conspiracy theorists saw in this the perfect shield, a frozen vault guarded not by soldiers, but by paperwork. Every restricted zone, every classified study, every satellite image blurred by snow became fuel for suspicion. In truth, the treaty preserved the last wilderness on Earth, but in imagination, it protected something far more precious, the possibility that Byrd's warnings were real. Modern exploration has confirmed what Byrd could only sense. Deep radar imaging now reveals a continent alive beneath its silence. Moving glaciers, hidden rivers, and ancient meteor craters locked in ice. The magnetic anomalies, once dismissed as error, are now carefully studied, hinting at a complex geology unlike anywhere else on Earth. NASA has even tested Mars rovers on Antarctic plains, using the frozen soil as a mirror for alien worlds. The same cold, lifeless surface that frightened explorers in 1947 now prepares humanity for exploration beyond Earth. In a strange way, Admiral Byrd was right. The Antarctic does hold secrets beyond comprehension, only they are not supernatural. They are scientific, ancient, and waiting to be understood. Still, on quiet nights, as the wind howls across the polar plateau, the ice seems to whisper stories of things long buried, and perhaps somewhere beneath it all, truth and myth still sleep side by side. Decades after his death, Admiral Byrd's words still echo in lecture halls and documentaries. Scientists cite his early observations as foundations for modern polar research, while historians regard him as the last of the heroic explorers, a bridge between the age of discovery and the era of data. Yet for every scholarly reference, there remains a whisper of something deeper. Each new expedition finds itself compared to Operation Highjump, each unexplained signal or lost drone tied to the ghosts of 1947. In archives across Washington, several of Byrd's original reports are still classified under national security restrictions. The reasons are likely mundane, references to Cold War technology or reconnaissance, but the secrecy ensures the myth will never die. For some, Byrd's greatest discovery was not a place, but a question that endures. What lies beneath the limits we set for ourselves? Every year, research teams return to Antarctica to drill deeper into its frozen past. They study the gases trapped in ancient ice, the microbes living in subglacial lakes, and the hidden mountain ranges that divide the continent below. Each core sample is a time capsule reaching back hundreds of thousands of years. And yet the mystery persists. Navigation equipment still fails without warning near certain coordinates. Satellite images sometimes reveal patterns too regular to dismiss as nature. The explanations are scientific, but the curiosity they inspire is primal. For adventurers, Antarctica remains the final frontier, silent, endless, and unsolved. Many arrive chasing discovery. A few leave chasing ghosts. The ice holds both. To follow in Byrd's footsteps is to stand where the known world ends and listen. It is said that Antarctica keeps perfect memory. Each snowfall, each frozen layer preserves the breath of an ancient earth, dust from volcanoes, pollen from forgotten forests, and echoes of the first winds that crossed the planet. When scientists melt the cores and read their trapped air, they read time itself, and somewhere among those frozen records lie the traces of 1947, the faint chemical signatures of fuel, metal, and fire left behind by Operation Highjump. In that sense, Byrd and his men never truly left. Their story is embedded in the continent, pressed deep beneath the surface like a fossil of human ambition. Every mission that follows walks above their shadows. And if the ice remembers, perhaps it also forgives. In the end, Operation Highjump became more than a mission. It became a mirror, reflecting whatever each generation needed it to be. For some, it was proof of courage and endurance in a world of endless ice. For others, it was evidence that even the most powerful nations cannot explain everything they find. The truth likely rests somewhere between. The storms were real, the deaths recorded, the data preserved. But the mystery, that delicate fog of wonder, has outlived every photograph, every logbook, every official statement. Perhaps that is the nature of discovery. When faced with the unknown, humans see what they fear and what they hope. Antarctica gave both in equal measure. Its silence became a stage where imagination could breathe. And so the ice still keeps its counsel. Today, satellites orbit the poles, mapping every ridge and fracture of the frozen continent. Drones skim across the surface, and sensors reach through miles of ice to measure the unseen. Yet despite all our instruments, the spirit of the place remains untamed. Antarctica is still the last place on Earth where mystery feels possible. No roads, no cities, only wind, light, and silence. The same silence that swallowed the voices of men in 1947 and still hums beneath their footprints. From orbit, the continent glows like a white heart beating at the bottom of the world. It pulses with a beauty both ancient and alien, a reminder that there are places where humanity can only observe, never command. And perhaps that is why we are drawn back again and again, not to conquer, but to listen. 70 years after Operation Highjump, the logs are archived, the ships are gone, and the men who once faced the white horizon have all fallen silent. Only their story remains, drifting across time like frost on the wind. Was it only weather, exhaustion, and the harshness of nature? Or did Byrd glimpse something deeper, something he could not explain, and therefore could never speak of? No record can say, and perhaps none ever should. In the frozen south, answers sleep beneath miles of ancient ice, and maybe that is where they belong, for mysteries, like the world's poles, are meant to be cold, remote, and enduring. This is the story of Operation Highjump, a true event wrapped forever in snow and silence. The expedition ended long ago, but the ice remains, watching, waiting, remembering. The ice may have buried its answers, but the questions endure, whispering through history, across oceans, and into our imagination. If this story moved you, please subscribe to Sleepy Mysteries. Each episode explores true events where the line between fact and legend begins to blur. Share your thoughts below. What do you believe Admiral Byrd truly saw in those final flights over the white horizon? And what might still lie beneath the ice, unseen, but waiting? Next time, we leave the frozen South behind and sail toward the Galapagos Islands, a place once called Eden on Earth, but paradise has its shadows. A handful of dreamers sought freedom there and vanished. Their journals, their rivalries, and their final moments remain among the strangest mysteries ever recorded. Join Regina Sage Monroe in the Galapagos Affair, Paradise Lost, coming soon to Sleepy Mysteries. Until then, keep listening, because every truth still hides a secret.